You don't really feel the moment your child begins to unlove you. There's no announcement, no slam of the door. It's quieter than that. Like a faucet you left running that eventually dries out. At first it's small things, missed phone calls, postponed visits, vague excuses. You tell yourself they're busy. You tell yourself it's just a phase. You tell yourself anything to avoid facing the ache you feel growing in places you never knew could hurt this deeply. I spent most of my adult life building a world around my son. A world that kept him warm, fed, educated, protected. I was there when he was scared of thunderstorms. I was there when his father walked out. I stayed through everything. And when he got older I stayed back because that's what good mothers do, right? We fade into the background so they can shine. So when he called to tell me about the engagement I cried happy tears, the kind that come from knowing your child is about to begin something beautiful. I offered to help. I offered too much maybe. I paid for more than I should have. I gave more than they ever asked. And I did it with pride, not expectation. I never wanted credit. I just wanted to be included. To witness it. To be there. But what I got instead was silence. Delayed texts. Missed calls. And then that moment. That one moment. I was walking past his bedroom while he thought I couldn't hear. His voice was low, hushed, almost apologetic. He said, "We'll just tell her the cruise got canceled. She's old, she won't know." I stopped breathing. Not because of the words but because of how easily they fell from his lips. Like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Like I was fragile, forgettable, disposable. And I wish I could tell you that was the worst of it. That the real heartbreak came from that single moment. But no. That moment was just the first crack. The first tremor in the ground beneath my feet. The real story begins when they told me I wasn't welcome at the wedding, that I didn't fit the aesthetic. After everything. After the love. After the money. After the years. They wanted me invisible. So I stayed silent. On the outside. But inside. I was writing something. Not with words. Not with rage. But with precision. And a little white dress that I paid for. There was no screaming. No confrontation. Just a quiet message tucked inside the seams, waiting to be found. And when it was, everything they built unraveled faster than they could say I do. I wasn't born knowing how to be a mother. No one ever is. But when my son was placed in my arms, tiny, warm, full of possibilities, I knew I'd spend every breath in me making sure he never felt what I felt growing up, alone. He became the reason I got up in the morning. The reason I worked double shifts. The reason I skipped meals to make sure he had enough. His father? He didn't stay long enough to see the first tooth come in. He left when our son was 2 and never looked back. No postcards. No birthday cards. Just a name my son learned not to ask about anymore. It was just us. Me and him. And that was enough. I still remember his 4th birthday. I stayed up all night sewing a makeshift superhero cape because I couldn't afford the real thing. When he ran through the house yelling, "I can fly, Mama," I cried in the kitchen where he couldn't see me. Not from sadness. From pride. From knowing that I was doing something right. I was there for the scraped knees, the science fair disasters, the heartbreak of his first failed test. I helped him build dioramas, cheered from the stands at every game, even when he sat on the bench. I made sure he never felt second best, even when I had nothing left to give. And when he got that scholarship, I screamed so loud the neighbor came over thinking something terrible had happened. But no, it was joy. It was the kind of joy that only a mother knows when her child wins. But then college came, and the calls got shorter. Less often. I told myself that was normal. Boys don't call their mothers like daughters do. That's what people say. So I sent care packages. I paid his phone bill. I helped with rent when he got his first off-campus apartment. He never asked for help, but I knew when he was struggling. Mothers always know. After graduation, he moved back in for a while. I didn't mind. I cooked his favorite meals, folded his laundry the way he liked it. I made space again. He met her not long after that. She was beautiful, smart, polished. The kind of girl that made you feel like you needed to fix your lipstick just to say hello. I was happy for him. Truly. The day he told me he wanted to propose, his hands were shaking. I could see that little boy again in his eyes. The one who used to ask me to double knot his shoelaces. I asked if he had the ring yet. He said no. Said he didn't want to propose without something special, but the kind he wanted was out of reach. So I made a phone call. Quietly, cashed in a small retirement account that had just started growing legs. Told the jeweler to keep my name out of it. He never found out. She said yes, of course. And I watched their engagement unfold like a fairy tale on her social media. String lights, laughter, champagne flutes raised to a future that sparkled. I smiled at every post, liked every caption, left comments with hearts and clapping hands. I played the part. Not because I was pretending, but because I wanted to believe I still had a part in this next chapter. When I offered to help with the wedding, she hesitated. Said things were already handled. So I asked if I could treat them to something instead, something they'd never forget. A cruise. Just the two of them. An all-expenses-paid romantic getaway before the wedding chaos began. I wanted them to have memories, the kind that come back in soft focus years later. They accepted, thanked me, hugged me. She even called me mom once by accident. I held on to that longer than I probably should have. I started noticing things, though. Subtle changes. Planning meetings happen without me. When I asked how the floral arrangements were coming, she said they'd already decided. When I mentioned the venue, she said it was just for close friends and family. I nodded even though I felt the air change. I started second-guessing myself. Did I say too much? Offer too much? Did I make her feel like I was intruding? I backed away a little. Gave them space. Stopped asking questions. Stopped offering opinions. But the distance didn't shrink. It grew. One afternoon, I was scrolling through my phone while waiting at the pharmacy. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just passing the time. That's when I saw it. Her post. A picture of her and her bridesmaids, laughing, arms wrapped around each other in satin robes, glasses of champagne raised. The caption read, "Final fitting for my dream dress, surrounded by my dream girls." I stared at it for a long time. Zoomed in. Scanned every face. Every corner of that photo. I wasn't there. I hadn't even known it was happening. And in that moment, something quiet inside me unraveled. Some betrayals aren't loud. They don't arrive with slamming doors or angry voices. No, some of them come in a whisper. A soft, careless thread of words not meant for you to hear. But once you do, they never leave you. It was a Saturday morning. They were in the guest room. I was walking down the hallway, towel over my arm, on my way to the laundry. The door wasn't closed all the way. I wasn't listening, I wasn't even curious. I just happened to be there. Right there. When it happened. His voice. Low. Uneasy. But clear. He said, "We'll just tell her the cruise got canceled. She's old. She won't know." That's all. 10 words. But I remember them like a prayer I didn't ask to learn. I froze. My fingers clutched the towel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My mouth went dry. My heart? It didn't race. No. It slowed. As if trying to figure out how to survive this new reality where I was no longer seen as a person, but as a problem to be managed. Old. That's what he said. She's old. And suddenly, all those little things I had brushed off made sense. The missed invitations. The cold tone in her texts. The half hugs. The photos I wasn't tagged in. The stories I heard secondhand. They weren't accidental. They were part of a slow erasure. A quiet restructuring of their world. A world where I no longer had a place. I waited. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd come to me that day. Tell me the truth. Admit it. Apologize. He didn't. Instead, they came out of the room later laughing. Holding hands. As if nothing had been said at all. As if I hadn't just heard my son hand-wave my entire existence into irrelevance. That night over dinner she brought it up. The cruise. Said she got an email from the company. Some glitch with the reservation. It's not happening anymore, she said almost too quickly. I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just took another bite of mashed potatoes. Then she pulled out her phone. Said she'd try calling the cruise line again, just to confirm. She even put it on speaker. I listened to her navigate the call, fumbling for details, asking about dates she pretended to forget. The call dropped. Or maybe she hung up. She sighed dramatically. Said, "Well, I guess that's that. Too bad." Then she smiled at me. Tilted her head. "It would have been fun, huh?" I nodded. I smiled back. And in that moment, I wasn't sure what hurt more, the lie or the performance. They thought I believed them, that I had no idea, that I would just accept this change of plans, forget it, move on. And that's when I realized. It wasn't the cruise. It was my place in his life that had expired. It was easier for them to pretend I was forgetful. Easier to reduce me to an age, to a stereotype, because if they had to face the truth, that I saw everything, remembered everything, they'd have to feel shame. And shame, for them, was too heavy to carry. So I stayed quiet. I didn't confront them. I didn't bring up what I heard. I let them live in the illusion that I was blind, deaf, and too old to matter. But inside, I was watching everything, memorizing details. I started paying attention to what wasn't said, the looks they exchanged, the tension that disappeared whenever I left the room. I began to understand something. I wasn't losing my son. I had already lost him. I just hadn't accepted it yet. I replayed that whisper over and over in my head for days. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't stop picturing his mouth forming those words. Words he would have never dared say if he thought I could hear. And still, I said nothing. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is preparation. A gathering of strength. A slow, steady sharpening. He thought I wouldn't know, that I wouldn't catch on, that I wouldn't remember. He forgot who raised him. He forgot who taught him to speak, who taught him that words have weight. And whispers carry further than you think. If you've ever felt the sting of being left out by someone you gave everything to, hit like. Let me know where you're watching from. I know I'm not the only one. It was a Sunday morning. The kind that used to mean pancakes, church dresses, and laughter in the kitchen. But now my Sundays were quiet. They stretched long and slow, filled with the clinking of teaspoons and mugs and the distant sound of the neighbor's lawn mower. I was sitting at the table, sunlight spilling through the curtains, reading the same sentence in a magazine over and over again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because something in me had started drifting lately, floating through moments I used to feel fully. And then my phone buzzed. Just once. A single notification. From him. I smiled, instinctively. Like a reflex. Even after everything. Even after the whisper. But when I opened it, my world stopped. It read, "Hey Mom. We talked. You're not invited to the wedding. Fiancé says you'll ruin the aesthetic. Hope you understand." No punctuation. No apology. Just a dismissal. A sentence that read more like a receipt than a message to the woman who raised him. I stared at it, trying to process the words, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd misread it. That autocorrect had stepped in. That another message would follow saying, "Sorry, wrong person," or "That was a joke." But nothing came. Just that silence, that same, familiar silence that had been growing between us like mold. My hand trembled. I could feel the pulse in my throat. A sharp, tight feeling started building in my chest. My vision blurred, not from tears but from shock. Real physical shock. My body reacting to what my heart couldn't yet grasp. Ruin the aesthetic. That word, aesthetic, echoed louder than the rest, as if I was some kind of stain on their perfect palette. As if the years I spent sacrificing sleep, dignity, dreams, had made me too unsightly to sit in a pew at my own son's wedding. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Only the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. The world around me didn't change, but inside something shattered. And in that silence my mind began to drift again backward. To the day she picked out her wedding dress. The boutique was small, soft lighting, lace-lined walls. She invited me. Said she valued my taste. I remember thinking, maybe I was finally being let in. Finally becoming part of something. Her voice was lighter that day. She laughed more. Even held my hand once while twirling in front of the mirror. She chose the one I pointed out. Said it made her feel timeless. She looked at me and said, "You know you have good taste, Mom." And when the clerk rang up the price, she hesitated. Bit her lip. Looked at my son. He rubbed the back of his neck and said, "We'll figure it out." I stepped forward. Quietly. Slid my card across the counter. They both protested. I insisted. The clerk asked whose name should be on the receipt. I said mine. Just in case. I tucked the paper into my purse and never brought it up again. I had paid for the dress, the one thing that mattered most to her. And yet, I was the one ruining the aesthetic. Suddenly I felt foolish, embarrassed, like I had volunteered to be humiliated, like I'd been auditioning for a role in their life that they had no intention of casting me in. But deeper than the embarrassment was the ache. The dull, hollow ache of becoming invisible to someone you gave your entire life to. It made me wonder, when do children stop seeing their parents as people? When do we go from being the center of their world to an inconvenience in their photos? I wasn't perfect. God knows I made mistakes. I yelled when I should have listened. I gave advice when he only wanted silence. But I loved him. Fiercely. Unconditionally. Without keeping score. And somehow, even that wasn't enough to earn a chair at his wedding. I sat there for a long time. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. I don't remember. Time bent in that moment. At some point I stood up. Walked into the hall closet. Reached up to the top shelf. Pulled down the box. The one I had saved, gently packed, wrapped in tissue, still holding the faint scent of the boutique's perfume. I opened it. There it was. Her dress. Folded neatly. Untouched. Untarnished. The symbol of a future I was no longer allowed to witness. And beside it, tucked in the same box, was the receipt. My name. My card. My love. Printed in ink. I held it in one hand. The dress in the other. Then I sat down at the table again. This time not in shock. Not in grief. But in clarity. I looked at the receipt. Then I looked at the box. And I knew exactly what I had to do. There's a moment after heartbreak where the grief cools. It doesn't disappear, but it changes. It stops roaring and begins to simmer. And in that quiet, something else emerges. Something steady. Something still. That's where I was when I sat back down at the kitchen table, the wedding dress box beside me, the receipt in my hand. I wasn't crying anymore. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing had slowed. I was thinking clearly for the first time in weeks. I thought about how much I had given, not just money but memory, time, pieces of myself. And how none of it seemed to count unless it fit neatly inside their curated vision of who I was supposed to be. Something soft. Silent. Small. But I wasn't small. I had been big enough to raise a boy into a man. Big enough to carry him through life while carrying my own pain. And now? Now I would be big enough to walk away with my head high. Still, I couldn't leave it at that. I didn't want revenge that shouted. I didn't want a scene. I wanted something quiet. Something that would live in their minds longer than my absence in their photos. I wanted to leave a message that would outlive the wedding day. So I went to my desk. Opened the drawer where I kept the nice stationery. The kind I used for thank you notes and birthday letters. The paper was thick, cream-colored, with faint gold trim. I sat with it for a while, staring at the blank space. I wasn't sure what to say at first. But then my hand moved. I didn't overthink it. I just wrote the truth. I folded the note once. No envelope. No signature. Just paper and ink. A message meant for one person, but heavy enough for two. I walked back to the box. Unfolded the layers of tissue paper. Slipped the note beneath the bodice of the dress. Tucked into the silk like a heartbeat waiting to be found. Then I closed the lid. I didn't send it with a return address. I didn't use my handwriting on the label. I brought it to the local mailing center, asked them to print everything. I paid in cash. I didn't want it traced back. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted the mystery to linger. I wanted them to wonder. The note read, "This dress was bought with love, but love isn't a costume. You can't wear what you haven't earned." I sent it with enough time for it to arrive just before the wedding. I imagined the box being opened in a room full of laughter, champagne flutes, and soft music. I imagined her pulling back the lid, reaching in, finding the note tucked against the same fabric she had once twirled in with joy. And then I imagined the silence. That thick, uncomfortable silence that falls when truth walks into the room. I didn't attend the wedding. I wasn't invited. But in a way, I was still there. Not as an accessory. Not as a background character. But as a truth they couldn't ignore. I sat home that day. Made myself a cup of tea. Put on one of my favorite old movies. The kind I used to play when he was little and sick on the couch. The house was quiet. Still. But I didn't feel alone. I felt something else. A strange kind of peace. Like I had finally let go of something heavy I didn't even realize I was carrying. They had tried to erase me, but all I did was underline who I was. In pen. On paper. In a dress they could no longer pretend was theirs alone. You see, sometimes you don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes, a whisper written in ink will echo louder than any voice raised in anger. And sometimes, dignity looks like silence folded neatly inside a box. If you think silence can be louder than words, hit that subscribe button. Stories like these of women rising from betrayal deserve to be told. Weddings are supposed to be magical. That's what they say. A beginning wrapped in white satin and fresh flowers, tucked neatly into rows of gold chairs and camera flashes. Fairy tale they call it. But what no one ever talks about is what happens when the story doesn't go as planned. I wasn't there that morning. I didn't see it firsthand. But I can picture it clearly. The bridal suite, filled with steam from curling irons and the sugary scent of setting spray. Champagne glasses half full. Girls in silk robes whispering, posing, fixing each other's hair. The bride, my son's bride, standing in front of a floor-length mirror. Her dress still boxed, untouched, waiting for that final picture-perfect moment. She opens the box. She lifts the lid slowly, like she's unveiling treasure. She peels back the tissue paper, and there it is. The dress, still glowing under the soft lights. Still everything she thought it would be. Until she sees it. A folded piece of cream stationery, no envelope, tucked gently into the bodice. A note. No name. Just a single line written in smooth, deliberate ink. This dress was bought with love, but love isn't a costume. You can't wear what you haven't earned. First, no one knows what to make of it. A bridesmaid gasps. Another asks, "Wait, what is that?" The bride's fingers shake as she reads it again. Her cheeks flush. The room stills. The music playing from someone's phone gets abruptly silenced. That one line echoes louder than the laughter that came before it. Then it begins. Who put this here? Was this in the box? Was this a prank? But she knows. She knows exactly where that message came from. She clutches the note tighter, jaw clenched, lips pressed into a thin line. And just like that, the fairy tale starts to crack. She storms out of the suite, dress still hanging. Finds my son in the hallway, tugging at his cufflinks, laughing with his best man. "Did your mother send this?" she asks him, shoving the note into his chest. He stares at it, reads it once, then again. He doesn't answer right away, just looks at her, blinking, confused. Or pretending to be. "I don't know what this is," he says. But the guilt is already written all over his face. And that's when it explodes. Her voice rises. Guests nearby pretend not to listen, but they do. The makeup artist in the corner texts someone. A groomsman quietly slips out of the room. A bridesmaid pulls out her phone under the table. "You said she was done. You said she wouldn't be a problem." The bride snaps. "You lied." He tries to calm her. Tries to laugh it off. But it's too late. The moment has ruptured. The illusion of perfection is gone. She threatens to change dresses. He says she's being dramatic. She accuses him of being just like his mother. He says she's ungrateful. Meanwhile, back in my house, just a 20-minute drive away, I'm curled up on the couch with a blanket, watching a movie I've seen 100 times. The kettle whistles. I pour myself some tea. I check the weather. It might rain. Then my phone buzzes. A single text from a number I know all too well. "Did you send a note in the dress?" I stare at it for a second, let the question hang in the air. Then I type back slowly, one finger at a time. "What dress?" And I set the phone down without waiting for a reply. Because I already know they're scrambling. I know the bride is questioning everything. I know the guests are whispering. I know the groomsmen are texting each other in a separate group chat. And I know my son is finally realizing that quiet doesn't mean powerless. They thought they'd erased me. Thought I'd fade into the background. Thought I'd disappear like a distant memory. But I was right there. In every thread of that wedding gown. In every seam stitched with money they didn't ask where it came from. In every bead bought with the hands that once held him through the night. In the note tucked into silk like a secret they never wanted to face. They thought I was gone. But they were wrong. I was the part of the wedding they couldn't control. And the part they'd never forget. It didn't take long for the wedding photos to show up online. There they were. Her in that dress. Him beside her. The arch of flowers. The string quartet in the corner of the frame. Everything as they had imagined, except her smile. It wasn't there. In every shot she looked tight. Composed, yes. But tense. Her eyes pulled in, her shoulders stiff. Like she was bracing for something invisible. My son beside her tried. You could see it in the way he leaned toward her. Laughed with just a little too much force. But it didn't land. And no matter how carefully they filtered the photos or cropped the frames or spun the captions, people noticed. You can't edit body language. You can't Photoshop energy. The comments started slowly, then picked up. She looks upset. Did something happen? Why does the groom look like he's apologizing in every picture? I didn't respond. I didn't even react. I saw the photos just like everyone else. Scrolled past them with the same thumb I used to stroke his hair when he had nightmares. A few days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Silence. Not a text. Not a call. Just distance. The kind that feels like standing outside a house you used to live in, realizing your key no longer fits the door. Then one afternoon my phone rang. But it wasn't him. It was her mother. Her voice was calm, careful. She introduced herself like we were strangers, even though we'd stood shoulder to shoulder once, picking out centerpieces. She said she hoped I was well. Said she'd been meaning to call. Then she said, "Would you be open to meeting? Just to talk?" I paused. Not because I was angry, but because I was surprised. Surprised that anyone on that side still remembered I existed. I told her I'd think about it. I never got around to calling her back. And maybe that was petty. Or maybe it was just peace. Sometimes the most powerful decision isn't confrontation. It's choosing where not to return. Another week passed. Then my son finally called. His voice was flat, strained, like he wasn't sure how to begin, or maybe he wasn't sure he even wanted to. He skipped the greetings. Went straight to it. "You embarrassed us," he said. No question. Just accusation. And for a moment I almost laughed. Because that was the story he'd told himself. That I was the problem. That I ruined something. That I made a choice that cost him peace. But I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I said no. I reminded you. He didn't understand. I could hear it in his silence. So I said it again, softer. "You forgot me." He was quiet for a long time after that. I didn't fill the silence. I let him sit in it. Let him hear what absence feels like. Then I said, "I raised you to be a man who doesn't forget where he came from. Who doesn't write people out of his story when the chapters get good." He muttered something about needing time. I said, "Take it." And I meant it. 'Cause by then, I had already started building something new for myself. I had signed up for therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I kept giving so much to people who gave so little in return. The therapist was kind. Asked questions no one had ever asked me. Gave me space to speak without interruption. I cried in the first session. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in years someone looked at me like I mattered just for existing. I bought a new journal. Leather-bound, smooth pages with a ribbon to mark my place. I started writing again. Letters I never sent. Memories I didn't want to forget. Things I wished I had said louder when I had the chance. And I joined a book club. A local one at the library 2 blocks down. Women of all ages. Some younger. Some older. We talked about fiction, yes. But also about grief. About growing older. About being invisible in a world that only celebrates youth and beauty. I didn't tell them everything. But they knew enough. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Heard. Whole. The silence between me and my son continued. He never apologized. Not really. But that was okay. I stopped needing it. Because healing doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself. Again. And again. And again. He called me once more months later. Just to say hi. The tone was lighter. Hesitant. Like he wanted to test the waters. I responded with kindness. But I didn't offer more than I had. Because love, when it's not respected, becomes labor. And I had finally retired from working for scraps of affection. I had made peace with the truth. I wasn't the villain in their story. I just stopped letting them write mine. Some people think power is loud, that it looks like confrontation, like shouting, like slamming doors. But real power, it's quiet. It moves slowly, deliberately. It shows up in ink, in choices, in names removed from documents. That's how I took my power back. It started with a folder. A plain manila folder sitting on my kitchen table. Inside it were copies of my old will. Documents I hadn't looked at in years. Pages I once filled with hope, legacy, love. His name was everywhere. My son. The one I carried through nights of fever. The one I built a life around. But as I sat there, looking through the details, home accounts, my grandmother's wedding set, my journals, I realized something painful and freeing at once. I was leaving everything to someone who no longer saw me. Someone who treated my love like a transaction and my presence like a blemish. And I thought, why? Why does biology get to define worth? Why does memory only count when it's convenient for them? So I picked up the phone, called my lawyer, asked her to meet that week. She said yes without hesitation. She'd seen enough families unravel to understand. We sat in her office, papers spread out before us. She read the old will quietly, looked at me, said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I've never been more sure of anything." We rewrote every line. I removed his name, carefully, not out of rage but clarity. In his place I wrote another name, one that had stayed in the background all these years, gently, quietly, consistently loving me without condition. Her name was Marion. She was never family by blood, but when I was sick after my surgery, she brought soup. When I had no one to call on Christmas, she dropped off a tin of cookies and sat on my couch in silence just to be there. She never asked for anything, but she always gave. So I gave something back. I left her the house, the savings, my wedding ring, which she always admired but never asked to try on. I left her my recipes, my journals, the black and white pictures of me in my 20s, because I knew she'd honor them. I signed the final page with steady hands, and when I was done, I exhaled like I hadn't breathed in years. It didn't end there. After I left the lawyer's office, I took a walk. The kind of walk where your footsteps fall into rhythm with your thoughts. I passed the boutique on 7th, the one I used to glance into but never dared walk through. It always looked too expensive, too young, too not for me. But something pulled me that day. I stepped inside. The clerk greeted me kindly, didn't look past me, didn't pretend I was invisible. I told her I was looking for a dress, not for anyone else's occasion, not to please a crowd. A dress just for me. She smiled, walked me over to a rack near the window. That's when I saw it. It wasn't white. It wasn't beige or navy or floral. It was red. Deep. Bold. Rich like garnet under soft light. The kind of red that doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. I slipped into the dressing room, pulled it over my shoulders. It fit like it had been waiting for me. Like it knew the kind of woman I had become. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't see someone's mother. Someone's disappointment. Someone's burden. I saw me. Alive. Whole. Radiant in ways that had nothing to do with age or approval. I bought it. Paid in full. Ran my fingers along the seams. And then out loud, to no one in particular, I said, "That's the dress I'll be buried in." Not out of morbidity, but out of pride. Because it was the only dress in my entire life that was bought for me, by me, for who I truly am. Not for a role, not for a photo, not for a day that excluded me. I used to believe legacy was what we left to others. Now, I believe legacy is what we leave inside ourselves. And that dress? It wasn't a costume. It wasn't a performance. It was my armor. My truth. My reclamation. And when the time comes, they'll see me in it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize I was never just a side character in their story. I was writing my own all along. Time is strange. Doesn't heal all wounds like they say. But it does give them space. And in that space sometimes things bloom. Sometimes they rot. And sometimes they return. 2 years passed. Seasons shifted. Leaves fell. Birthdays came and went. I kept living, not loudly but fully. I cooked new meals. Learned how to use the timer on my phone camera. Made friends at the book club who remembered my stories better than my own family ever did. My home grew quieter but my heart stronger. Then one afternoon, I ran into a friend at the farmer's market. The kind of friend who always has one eyebrow raised and one secret she's dying to tell you. She leaned in close, her voice lowered but sharp like a paper cut. "Did you hear?" she said. I didn't ask who she meant. I just waited. "They're separated." I blinked. Said nothing. She added, "Apparently it's been messy. Real messy. She moved out. Took half the furniture. Told a friend at brunch that she should have listened to his mother. That love doesn't come in boxes. And you can't wear it like a costume." I looked down at the strawberries in my basket. Bright red. Ripe. A few bruised. I picked one up and placed it back gently. And then I smiled. Not because I was happy about their pain, but because truth has a way of ripening too. Sooner or later, it finds its way to the surface. I didn't reach out. Didn't say a word. I had let go of the story long ago. But stories, they have a way of circling back when you least expect them. A few weeks later my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds, then picked up. His voice was different. Smaller. There was no edge, no pride laced between the syllables. Just weariness. "Mom," he said. Just that word. And for a moment I remembered the little boy in the back seat asking if he could have extra fries. The one who wrote me a crayon Mother's Day card that said, "You're the best cooker and best hugger in the whole world." But I also remember being erased. Forgotten. Dismissed. I remember being told I'd ruin the aesthetic. He took a breath. Said, "I'm sorry. I should have never." I stopped him gently. Said, "I forgave you long ago." He let out a breath, like he was holding something heavy inside. Then I added, "But forgiveness doesn't mean access." Silence. I let him sit in it. Because some truths don't need to be yelled. They just need to land. He asked if we could start over. Maybe have dinner. Talk. I told him calmly, "I'm not angry anymore. But I've built a life that doesn't orbit around being chosen. And I'm not stepping back into a space where I'm only remembered when things fall apart." I wished him well. Truly. And then I hung up. I stood in front of the mirror that evening. Brushed my hair back. Opened the closet where the red dress still hung. Untouched, pristine. A quiet reminder of the day I chose myself. Some people think power is revenge. But for me it's peace. Peace that comes from knowing I didn't need to break them to rebuild me. He walked away once. Then came back when things crumbled. And I chose to remain whole. Because that's the real twist. Not the note. Not the dress. Not even the will. The real twist is that I no longer needed to be part of their story. I had written my own. And it was honest. Bold. And entirely mine. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's ever felt abandoned by their own blood. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We tell real stories. Raw truths. One heartbreak at a time. They thought the wedding was the ending. That excluding me meant erasing me. That silence meant surrender. But I never needed a wedding invitation to find closure. All I needed was one note, sewn into silk, to remind them who I am.